Welcome to StopFake, the place where we identify fakes and debunk them to set the record straight about disinformation in Ukraine. I'm Brian Mefford, and our stories this week are Crimean EU Representative Office, Poland to leave EU, Donbas conflict participants create a Russian-Ukrainian union, Ukraine to jail Russians for visiting Crimea. So let's get to it. Izvestia, Moskovsky Komsomolets, Interfax, and other pro-Kremlin publications reported that an EU office representing Russian-annexed Crimea would begin operations in 2019. This office would be a lobbying effort aimed at promoting the interest of Crimea in the European Union. Izvestia claims that this latest Russian Crimea initiative is actively supported by Belgian Member of Parliament Philip de Winter and Austrian Senator Gerhard Dorfler. Izvestia quotes Dorfler, who says the lobby office will provide many advantages for Crimea and open access to official data and expert groups. Philip de Winter is a leading member of Flemish Choice, a right-wing Flemish nationalist and secessionist party. Gerhard Dorfler, a member of the far-right Freedom Party, is a former governor of Austria's Carinthia province and now serves in Austria's upper house in parliament. The EU's press officer in Ukraine, David Stulik, told Radio Liberty that the EU fully supports Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and will never recognize any Crimean representative office. Quote, "We have never recognized, do not recognize, and will not recognize any self-proclaimed representative offices or institutions of authority of the annexed Crimea. We have no desire to cooperate with them in any way, shape, or form," end quote, Stulik said. It is worth noting that neither de Winter nor Dorfler are members of the European Parliament and therefore have no right to speak for the European Union in any capacity. European Union bursting at the seams, Poland ready to leave, announced Ukraina.ru, RIA, and TASS on October 11th, claiming that Warsaw was poised to launch Polexit because of a conflict with Brussels. The source for this latest fake was none other than the European Council's president and Poland's former Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who criticized Poland's latest judicial reform. Russian media couldn't manage to spin this fake in just one direction, however, as some predicted a complete EU collapse, others claimed Poland was pulling out, and others simply distorted what Tusk said. Tusk did urge the Polish government to stop fighting with Brussels about the judicial reform in the country, which was enacted in June, as such fighting might lead to an accidental Polexit. The law has been criticized because it hands effective control of the judicial and Supreme Court appointments to the ruling party, thus eroding judicial independence. This reform led to mass protests throughout Poland, and the European Union has accused Poland's leadership of violating the fundamental principles of judicial independence. Tusk expressed concern about Poland's judicial reform, saying that it could inadvertently lead to something potentially more dangerous. Neither Donald Tusk nor the European Union have spoken about Poland actually leaving the EU. And the Law and Justice Party also has never called for Poland to leave the EU. Ukraina.ru announced last week that conflicting sides in the Donbas war in eastern Ukraine formed an organization that would help end the war. The source for this announcement is the Open Ukraine YouTube channel, owned by pro-Russian agitator Alexander Medinsky. Open Ukraine is a channel whose content is largely made up of fake news and pro-Kremlin propaganda. The source of this nonsense is a YouTube video in which two men, one holding a chunk of salo, a traditional Ukrainian pork fat delicacy, and another with a bottle of vodka, ran about the fratricidal war, how Ukraine heading for the European Union became a neo-Nazi totalitarian state, and how their Ukrainian-Russian union will save the day and solve everything. One of the men is Alexander Medinsky, a former street agitator for ousted Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych, and the other is Alexei Maroshenko, the director of a private Russian military company. Medinsky is the former director of the Eurasian Youth Union, a Russian nationalist, anti-West European political organization. The youth wing of the Eurasian Party is headed by Russian theorist and far-right ideologue Alexander Dugin. Since launching his Open Ukraine YouTube channel, Medinsky has taken to calling himself a journalist. Currently, he resides in Finland, where he managed to obtain asylum with the help of Johan Beckman, the so-called official representative of the Donetsk People's Republic in Finland. RIA Novosti, RT, Ukraina.ru, and others featured stories last week claiming that Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko had called for a new law that would make Russian tourists who visit annexed Crimea or the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics subject to criminal prosecution. Russian talking heads immediately accused Kyiv of infringing on Russian rights, orchestrating a Russian genocide, and spreading Russophobia against a fraternal people, while Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova declared that Ukraine was ratcheting up the hysteria. Russian legal experts began citing international law and asserting that the new law discriminated against Russians. Russian Duma member Natalia Pokolonskaya declared that the new law was aimed at Crimeans who will be the first to be detained on the Ukrainian mainland. On November 9th, a new law on illegal border crossings came into force into Ukraine. This law establishes criminal liability for crossing Ukraine's state border to damage the interest of the state, for those who are banned from entering Ukraine but do so illegally, for aggressor state militaries that enter Ukraine through unofficial border crossings, or enter through official border crossings without documents, or with documents containing false information. Foreigners who enter Crimea from Moscow violate the new law, but those who enter Crimea through Ukraine will not be in violation. As for claims of discrimination against Russians and infringement of Russian rights, this is a classic Kremlin distortion and manipulation. The law does not isolate any national group. It applies to all who violate Ukraine's legislation regarding its borders. Georgia enacted a similar law in 2008 after Russia occupied Abkhazia and South Ossetia. That's it for this week. You can find more dissected disinformation on our website, StopFake.org. Be vigilant. Do not consume fakes. They are harmful for your health. If you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, send it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Brian Mefford, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.